Hi. So, as you will be aware, we, ever since the George Floyd incident in America last week, maybe 2 weeks ago now, depending when we release this, I've spent a bit of time listening, talking, having conversations with people from the um, Black community, BAME community, um, trying to understand what's going on. And obviously, um, we we have that community. I've been chatting to people from our nation, people internationally, but also we have those people in our church, in our family. And Hannah Scollen has been um, vocal. She's been vocal, encouragingly vocal on social media and on our YCC page. And so I thought it'd be really good to hear Hannah's voice on this. So, Hannah, hello. How are you
Hi,
doing?
I'm great. Yeah, I'm doing great.
Good. Um, yeah. So, do you want to talk a bit about your background? Like, what's your what's your story? What's your background? You're mixed race. So, do you
Yeah.
want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, so I'm half Brazilian. Um, my mum's Brazilian, my dad's English. But actually, we found out more recently that in our ancestry, because everyone in Brazil is mixed race, like everyone, because we had invaders, then we had Europeans come in. So, like, you don't really know where you fit. You're not just one type of Brazilian. So we actually found out that we are descendants of slaves that came from Africa to work at the plantations in Brazil. So that was a big shock that I had to kind of process, because I'd always known that I was Brazilian, but I never knew further than that. I never knew what I was,
Your
like, where I
heritage
came
was,
from.
yeah,
Yeah, 100%.
yeah,
So that was really quite interesting, and it's definitely pushed my, like, passion towards, like, Black Lives Matter a lot further than what it was before, because I didn't
right,
really know where I fit before when it came to, like, Brazilians. So yeah.
yeah. Okay. And you've been part of YTC for how many years now? 7, 8,
7
9?
years.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, it's been about 7 years. And before YCC, I used to live in Bolton, so up north. But that was quite a diverse area. So I wasn't really used to not having anyone kind of similar to me until I
Right.
moved down here. So that was a big change. Yeah.
Okay. So, well, then let's talk about that. What's your experience been? Um, yeah, what's your experience been um, of racism in your through your life?
hmm So when I was in primary school, when I was in reception, I was 4 years old because I'm an August baby. So yeah, I was quite young. And there was this girl that came up to me, and she scratched me in the face. She was also 4, and she, like, pushed me up against a wall and, like, scraped, like, half of my face. Um, and I didn't really understand where it came from, but it turns out it was because I was brown. And I think in that was the first experience that I had of racism, but I didn't realize how deep it was until obviously I got older and understood why she kind of did it. But it did, like, make me really realize that actually racism is taught. It's not something that you're born with, because there is no chance that a 4-year-old would, like, discriminate against someone for no apparent reason. And then we found out later on that it was something to do with her brothers. Her brother said something about me. They picked her up from school and saw me, and said something about it. And I think she was quite embarrassed to be my friend, and that is where it kind of all came from that perspective. And then so as it went on, like, through primary school, it wasn't that bad. Other than that incident, because there were other mixed race people in my class, and in up north there are so many mixed race people, like, from every type of background. So I didn't really feel like I was out of place. More than half of my class were mixed race, so I was really quite comfortable with the friends that I had, and I had no really, like, bad experiences. And then we moved to Yeovil, and that was a really, really big difference, because being from a class where more than half of my class were mixed race to a class where I was the only one in my class, or basically the only one in my year. There were 3 of us in year 7 that were like mixed race or like people of color. So that was really a big change. And people would they'd be like passively racist, so they wouldn't be intentional, but they'd say stuff like, where are you from, like how come you're brown but you like have a normal accent, and things like that, which kind of, it was quite rude in the way that they would like portray that, and obviously they were intrigued to know, but it was just the way that they said it. So that was kind of in year 7 when I first moved, and then a couple of years went by, and I got into a friendship group with some nasty people, and I thought that they were my friends, and I thought that everything they said was a joke. So they would say stuff like they would call me the N-word, and they'd be like, "Oi," and then they'd call it, and they would like get me to come over to them, and they'd kind of like demand me to do things, and then, you know, one time it got really bad, like one of my friends was like, "Oh, you know, go back to cotton picking," and that was really kind of significant because I'd never really associated myself with African American background. I'd always thought, well, I'm Brazilian, so I can't, like, people can't be racist to me because I'm not like the same as an African American. But I did realize that it wasn't the ethnicity, it was purely my skin color, and it didn't matter like where I was from. If I was darker than them, it meant that I was on the same level as slaves, which I thought was really quite disrespectful. And after that, I'd never really recovered from that, and I did have quite a bit of an identity crisis during that time. So I was like straightening my hair like basically every day because I didn't think that curly hair was nice. I didn't think people liked it, and I'd always get compliments when I straightened my hair, so I was like, oh well, people prefer it that way. And I stopped going into the sun. I stopped trying to tan, because in the summer I get darker and in the winter I get lighter, just like any other person does, but people don't understand that happens to me as well. They think, oh, I'm brown, so I'm just brown. So I would stop going into the sun, and I'd start wearing like white makeup to make me look lighter. So there were certain things that triggered other things that now I realize like that I didn't even think were that important. I thought, well, if they don't like me for the color of my skin, then if I make myself whiter, they'll like me more. But actually I ended up getting more criticism because they were like, why are you trying to be white? Like who are you walking into school thinking that you're white now? So there was kind of no winning either way. So that was probably the worst thing that I experienced at secondary. Yeah.
And what about in church? Because you talked about school and whatever, but you've been around YCC for 7 years. You've been in the youth, and so how's that been?
Well, at first it was good. I think people were they kind of liked the fact they had like a different friend. People would flex me a lot, and they'd be like, oh, like, look at my friend, like she's like mixed. And you know, at first it was great, and then I started getting comments like when I'd be kind of really like charismatic and really like enthusiastic about random things, and I would dance and I would just like be quite hyper at like youth group. I had a few comments saying like, stop trying to be black, or like just stop trying to be someone that you're not, and things like that, which I didn't think were a big deal, because I was like, no, these people love me, they're from the church, like they love me, they want to be around me. But stop trying to be black was the main thing that I would hear constantly whenever I was trying to be myself. So I felt like after that I couldn't really dance, I couldn't really be loud, I couldn't really do things that are part of my personality, because people thought that I was trying to be black. And then I had this one friend who was part of the youth group, who was black, and me and her like got really quite close. And people had a lot to say about that. They were saying, you know, like, why are you trying to join into her culture? She's a black one, you're not. Like, why are you trying to dance with her? Why are you trying to be like her? It's not your culture, it's not your place. So things things like that I didn't expect to get from the church, I did get from the church. And I do have a couple friends who did go to my school as well as the church, and they'd hear stories from school and then they'd laugh about it and they'd bring those stories from school to youth group, which I didn't really expect would happen either. So just things like that, which I didn't, yeah.
So then, yeah, thanks for sharing. And just sorry that that's been part of your experience here. So talk a little bit how this last week, 10 days, has felt for you, watching what's going on in America. How's that felt for you as a person of mixed race, as a part of that community?
At first I didn't really know where I fit, because obviously I'm Brazilian, but I'm kind of half. So like, even though my skin was darker, I felt like I didn't really have as much of a voice as people who were black or are black. So at first I really struggled with how I fit in. And then I realized actually I am like a victim of racism, so I shouldn't keep myself quiet because this applies to me too. So I started, raising my voice a bit. And then when I found out about my heritage and ancestry and things, it kind of unfolded a bit more. But like, in terms of how I felt, like I was like properly heartbroken. Like I saw the video of, when George died, and that really, I've honestly never seen something so brutal. And after that, I posted something on my Instagram and on my Snapchat about like how horrendous it was, and I was crying on the video, and someone actually messaged me asking me to take it down because they felt uncomfortable with me crying. And I was just like, are you serious? Like, if you don't want to see it, then remove yourself like from my social media. But yeah, exactly. I was actually really quite angry about that, because I was like, you can't tell me that I can't be emotional about this because you feel uncomfortable when you were the oppressors. Do you get what I mean? Right. So that was really quite hard to deal with that. I'm actually really quite happy about the movement itself and how many people have changed and how many people are actually caring about it. I am really happy about that. And there have been so many people that have changed their hearts, which is amazing. But at the same time, there's always a difference between whether they're doing it because it's a trend or whether they're doing it because they actually believe it. So having that, being able to distinguish whether it's the trend or whether it's because they actually believe in the movement has been really quite hard, because obviously I'm not one to judge. I can't be like, oh, they're posting all this stuff, but like, they're just doing it for the trend. But to me, certain aspects of it where the people who were racist to me earlier, like in my school life, and then posting all this Black Lives Matter, like we really care about black people, I've always been anti-racist. And I'm like, well, you haven't, because where were you when I was in those situations of oppression? Like, where were you in that? Were you defending me? Like, were you the one that was stopping people from doing that? So it's things like that which I get frustrated about, but yeah. I'm trying to have a bigger perspective on it. Like, at least they've changed. At least they are trying to accept the fact that it is definitely an issue.
Yeah, I think that's why conversations like this are important, because who's not going to be impacted by watching the video of George Floyd life seep out of him with this police officer's knee on his neck? And I mean, it's horrific and traumatic, and it does something to your soul, right? Like, who isn't gonna kind of go, you know what? Yeah, that Black Lives Matter, and I'm offended by that, and that's. But I think it's really important that we hear how. I think it's really important how we hear how we're part of that same system. We might not be the police officer who holds his knee on the neck for 9 minutes, but there are gradations to the system, and this system isn't just this one incident. That one incident is a consequence of the system. And that system is something that isn't just American, it's British. And you've talked about it's Yeovil, it's YCC. It's like we don't get to deny this.
Mm-hmm.
We don't get to. So I think it's really important that we hear how, obviously none of us we would like to think would be the person who put their knee on the neck of a black man until he died, but we might make these comments. We might perpetuate this story. We might hold these attitudes which create the context where that sort of thing is the end result. So I think that it's really brave of you to talk about this and your experiences, and thank you for having the courage to do that. And I know even when I pushed you on, okay, well, tell us about YCC, like we have to hear that. Like we have to hear that, and then we have to think about what changes as a consequence of that. But I'd love to hear you talk a little bit. It's great to hear your voice. It's really great to hear your voice. I know we're used to hearing your beautiful voice leading us in worship, and we love that. But it's important to hear your voice in this context as well. I'm interested in where's your faith in this? Where's your theology in this? How does your faith inform you in this situation, in this issue?
Well, like I said on the Facebook post, like in Genesis, when God said that it's not good for man to be alone, that was most of the time. I watched quite a few preachers, and most of the time it's about relationship and it's about marriage and it's about how like it's not good to be alone and all that type of thing. But actually, I thought with a wider perspective, it's not good for people to be alone. It's not good for people to be going through certain things by themselves. So that was kind of like my foundation of actually God really cares about relationships, and he really cares about how we associate with each other. And the fact that that was in the first book of the Bible, in one of the first verses, and that was the only thing that he said was not good. He said everything was good. He said the world was good. He said the sky was good. He said, the sea and, the animals, everything was good. And that was the first time he said that it wasn't good.
Even
and that
cats.
Was
even cats.
Exactly. Yeah. Even cats. It was like, that was kind of the first time that he said it was not good. And I think that's a really significant part of the Bible. And I think people kind of oversee that because they're like, oh, it's the beginning. We can't really learn from much of that. That's the creation of the world. We can't really learn. But actually, God's foundation was relationships. And then that's further seen when Jesus dies on the cross, because that's a relationship between us and God. Another thing that I found was, God made us in his image. He didn't make us thinking, you know what, I'm going to make those people black so that the white people can oppress them. And I'm going to make those people white so that they can be the oppressors. Like, he didn't think that way, and he's not on a human level. So like bringing God down to a human level of, well, if God didn't want racism, then why did he create black people? And it's like things like that it's like, what type of argument is that, So it's when it's situations like that where God purposefully created man in his image, it shows that Black people were meant to be here. They were meant to be on this earth. They were meant to bring diversity, and diversity is important. And another thing that I found, during this time of, the movement, is that I've had a few friends message me saying, just so you know, like, I don't see color. Like, I see people, and I see people for who they are, and I don't see color. And I was like, that's exactly the problem. Like, you don't see color. The point of diversity is so that you see color. The point of this movement is so that you see that there are indifferences between color. There's white supremacy, there's white privilege, and people don't see color, so they don't end up seeing the bigger picture. And that has really been something that I've been challenged by, that, like, how am I supposed to communicate with people being someone of Christ, but also being someone who's really personally passionate about this topic, like how am I able to communicate with people in a way that still shows that Jesus is in me, but doesn't get so frustrated that I push people away and I change their opinion.
Yeah. And I think that diversity thing, Hannah, is so important, because I know what people are trying to get at when they say I don't see color, and I know what we're trying to get at when we say that sort of thing. But the point that you make about, God created everybody is beautiful, because it also means that therefore God is expressed through everybody. And the thing that I think maybe we miss sometimes on this is God is expressed differently through everybody. If we're all the same, we diminish God, because God is only is only expressed one way. Actually, and I think this is again something for us to think about as a church, but how God is expressed through you and your ethnicity and your culture and your creativity and your passion is that we shouldn't expect that God is expressed the same through everybody. We need to allow God to be expressed uniquely through everybody and celebrate that diversity, and celebrate that diversity of culture and diversity of expression and diversity of creativity. And I think that's some of what you're getting at. I think that's some of the point you're getting at. Like, let me express God the way God is expressed through me.
I've definitely found, actually reading the Bible through this and actually finding God's opinion in Scripture has been my foundation of where most of what I post comes from, because I need to make sure that what I'm posting isn't so opinionated that it's flawed in a way that actually this is God's opinion. This isn't my opinion. This is God's opinion on the world. And I was saying this to a couple of my friends earlier, that actually, if it wasn't for lockdown, and if it wasn't for everyone being, at home on their phones constantly, would this movement have even happened? Everyone was at home, so everyone was able to see the news. Everyone was able to see on social media about George Floyd. And considering previously this year we've had Breonna Taylor and Ahmaud Arbery, and only now have we had a movement, and that's only because we have been in such an enclosed space, an enclosed area, that we've only been able to notice. And I find it quite sad that we had to physically be removed from society in order to notice the injustices of our world. No one did anything when it came to Ahmaud Arbery. There were a couple of posts and then that was it. Same with Breonna Taylor. No one did anything. There were signing petitions, there was donating, but after a week or so, the trend, was over, and it wasn't that much of a big deal anymore. But then when George Floyd happened, because everyone was there, everyone witnessed it, there was a video, that's when everyone started to rise up. I think it's an amazing, time. I think honestly, like, God had planned all of this out, and even though it's an awful situation, I think this was the only way God was going to get through to us in terms of injustice. And if we were living normal day life, would we have even noticed? And that's what I keep trying to ask myself, and that's what I keep challenging my friends. Like, would you have even noticed that this is such a problem if it hadn't been for lockdown, and if you hadn't been on your phone the whole time? So that's been
it's a really interesting question, Hannah. It's really good. It's a really good challenge, and it's interesting because it's not. I mean, I have thought a little bit about, so why is this captured the imagination and the attention of the world in a way that exactly previous stories haven't. And it's because we start a new series on Sunday called Standing in the Rubble, and it's all about, so what's going on, and what the world's shifting and the world's changing, and what's God doing in that, and how's God calling us to emerge from that. And yeah, I guess from what you're saying, like, this is a linked conversation. This is part of what God's doing. This is part of how God's getting our attention. This is part of how God's going, I hear the cry of my people. I hear the cry of George Floyd with the knee on his neck, and I will not be silent. I will not stand back anymore. And it does feel like God is responding, and and urging and prompting and inspiring and pressing us to respond to. So yeah, no, I really like that. Really like that perspective that you've brought.
And in terms of scripture, I was kind of meditating on it because I was trying to get myself in the right place before I was able to share with other people. I didn't want to lead people into the wrong direction, into a wrong perspective of this, especially since, you know, I am a person of influence and people do listen to me, but considering I've got that personal connection as well, like it's even more of a perspective for people. So I was reading Proverbs 31, 8-9, and it says, "Speak up for those who cannot speak for themselves, and ensure justice for those being crushed. Yes, speak up for the poor and helpless, and see that they get justice." And that has really been, you know, everyone talks about Isaiah 117, everyone talks about that one, but no one talks about Proverbs 31.
Yeah.
And I think, you know, it's important that we actually, you know, take that time out, that we take that time off social media, because considering how much has been, like, people have been posting, some people aren't able to deal with the amount of information that is given. Some people need time out, and I really want to encourage people that during that time out, if you're turning your phone off and you don't want to see any more Black Lives Matter posts, or it's just too much for you, which I have done, you know, over the past couple of days. I haven't really been on social media because it's been really hard for me to see it's a constant trend, you know, everyone is posting about it, so it's a lot of information to take in. In my, you know, my quiet times, I've really been trying to like engage with God, and really been trying to say, like, God, like, you know, in the song, like, break my heart for what breaks yours, like, that is exactly how God feels in this situation. And this is, you know, this feeling of heartbreak, it's shown in our lives because this is how God feels, and we are people of God, so we should be showing that heartbreak to other people and being able to show that actually this is completely wrong. I do think that the Southwest especially has like quite a big racial problem, not necessarily in the aspect of brutality, because the US have really, really, you know, brutal situations, but I think people think that racism here is different to racism in the US. And the racism that underpins that brutality is different to the racism here, when actually it's the exact same. It's just the way that the way that people are being racist is by being passive and by not speaking up, and it's by being passive and, you know, saying a joke which doesn't mean that much, but actually it does. You know, words are really important. And, you know, God said about how we need to watch what we speak, you know, watch what we say from our tongue. And that has been really significant for me as well. Being that person of influence and being that person that people are going to listen to, I've had to be really careful with how I communicate, how I feel during this time, because there is a lot of frustration, and I don't want to come across as aggressive. I don't want to come across like, you know what, like, I'm BAME, like, you got to listen to me because it's my, you know, personal experience, because it isn't all about me. But having that balance of, you know, bringing God into what I have to say for other people, and trying to help people realize that racism is on an international level. It's not a national thing just for the US. It is an international level. And there have been so many cases where people have actually been killed by our police, and there haven't been any like posts, or there haven't been any, you know, outrages, because everyone in the UK is passive. So, you know, there was I was watching George the Poet. He had an interview with BBC News, and he was saying about how his friend, you know, was at a pub and he got arrested, and they snapped his neck while they were arresting him, and he was limp when he was being carried to the police van, and he actually died because they didn't take him to the hospital straight away. They kept him in the police van for 45 minutes. And if they had taken him straight to the hospital, he would have survived. And it's stories like that you don't think, you know, are within the UK. You don't think that will ever happen, but it does. And even if it was an accident, you know, the police still had that authority to take that man to the hospital, and they chose not to. So even in that act, if it wasn't on purpose, the passivity of that racism, you know, when he was in that van, he could have survived, and the police chose not to save him. So it does just show that actually passive racism does still kill, and we need to really change our perspectives of racism being a separate thing in America than it is to here. It's the same. It's the exact same.
Hannah, thank you so much for bringing you to this conversation, and your passion and your heart and your desire to be authentic and your desire to be a voice that leads and inspires people well, rather than just riles up anger. It's been beautiful and challenging listening to you. Sorry again for all the places we've been part of that problem at YCC, part of that system. But thank you for being part of us and bringing what you bring, and your gifting and your culture and your ethnicity, your heritage, and your story. Thank you so much.